so what do your computers say? Mine says 4:28.
Or 30, or 30, 32 on my watch.
Boy, my computer doesn't know what time it is. Okay. We'll call the meeting to order. Roll call.
Bender,
Here.
Ermeling,
Here.
Minell not here, Oldenburg,
Here.
Simmons,
Here.
Okay. Approval of minutes from previous meeting of June 21st. What's your pleasure?
Move to approve.
Moved by Ryan,
I'll second it.
second by Bob. On the question, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, so carried. Okay. Public comments, is there anyone on Zoom that? Okay, there's no one there, okay. No one in the audience. No one on the phone. Acknowledge work product transmittals, June budget status report.
We have a nice summary of where we were at the end of June. Is there any questions?
Questions or comments? Hearing none, would you like to make a motion to acknowledge?
Also move.
Motion by Bender,
Second.
second by Ryan. On the question, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, so carried. Education presentations and reports, TIF and budget presentation.
So we titled this one Government Accounting Basics 2. This time we're going to be talking more about the budgeting process, the current state of the village budget, and ending with tax increment financing. So our budget process starts this month. We usually start with expenditures, update the dates in our budget work papers, and update the wages. The main software we use is Excel. And in the past, we've had a very clunky budget process where every single department had its own spreadsheet, wages were its own, and then a lot of manual entering. We streamlined it, so with lots of formulas and links, we're able to enter our wages all in one sheet. And if you say, for example, at the last second you tell me my health insurance changed, I could change a number and all the departments will change in probably 30 seconds. So in the past, that last minute change would have took a couple days to fix everything. But streamlined our software. Excel seems to work with us. I would say if you get any more complicated, you might want to look for a better budget software, but it works. After the wages, we look at current increases in known benefits, what's WRS going up. Health insurance is going to be a challenge this year. This is going to be our first year on our new health plan. We're not going to know what the rates are until closer to the end of the year. Unfortunately, we usually adopt our budget in November with the required notice from the paper that last minute change may or may not get into the budget with our health insurance. Other than that, we go to the state website and see what current information is available there, equalized values, net construction TIF values, and with that, we go on to adjusting our budget. While wages are being worked on, we send out the link to the budget work paper to all department directors. So the department directors are able to go into their department and update current estimates and current requests for the next year's budget. Other than that, we keep that budget document open until right before the meeting we have with finance, showing them the budget that is going to go for publication. After that time, no more changes to the budget can be made by staff. That's not the last time for a change. We can change it at budget adoption night. That needs to be presented at the budget adoption and done through that process by the village board. Expenditures. Here's a good summary of our budget in a nutshell. We have personnel, just over 2 million. Non-discretionary, fixed fees and other and transfers. We organized it this way, as we know we're coming to a tighter budget, and you may be looking to say, well, where can we cut? It's a good picture of, well, personnel, you know, the only thing that changes that number is the number of people you have. Non-discretionary, those are things that we really don't have a lot of say in. I mean, the current processes and our policies at the village don't allow for much change in that number. Fixed fees, you can't really change those. Those are the fixed fees. And then the other, which are more of the discretionary. So if we look at the detail, here's the first one. Personnel, it includes hourly salary, benefits, and committee pays. Non-discretionary, utilities, we don't have much control in the cost. Standing salting, here's the policy one. Our board could go and say, we're not salting anymore, we're just gonna use sand. And then we'd be directing all snow calls to the village board at that time. A lot of people don't like how we don't pour a lot of salt on the road as it is. A lot of times during those small snowfalls, we do a salt route. So you get your salt at your intersections. City of Wassa, if you drive through their community after a small snowfall, I believe they put a little bit more salt on because their roads are very wet. Street maintenance is another kind of non-discretionary. If a snowplow is broken, we need to fix it. Fuel, it's a big line item for us. Bigger in the winter months if we have a bad year. Also very concerning right now, we haven't seen gas at $3 a gallon for unleaded for quite a while. Diesel's trending right now, but that's a line item we will be looking at future budgets a little bit closer. Assessor and audit both are required. We can always go out for RFPs, but usually we get the best deal. And those numbers probably aren't gonna be going down. Next page, these are the fixed ones. Everest Metro, we do not have a voting majority there. The village would say, we do not accept this budget, and the other 4 people vote for it, we would end up paying what they voted for. And same with Salt Area Fire. Both entities we're partnerships with others, and we don't have a voting majority. So when those are voted upon, it's usually the fee that we pay. Insurance in court. Insurance, we need insurance in Everest Metro Court, again with the joint venture with other municipalities. These are the discretionary, we label them discretionary, but some of them, like attorney is a big one on there, $35,000. This year, we are not gonna meet that. I think we went over already. Are pretty darn close, so
Not in the general.
it's pretty
I mean, we
close.
have, I know it's close, so we have to be a little more.
And by the end of the year,
selective,
we
but-
may not have kept the 35,000. Discretionary, meaning that if the board says we're gonna stop all attorney communications, that number would stay right where it's at. But as we know, we can't, that's the line that we need to use our attorneys, so it may fluctuate. As it indicates, a lot of the numbers on there are the excludes wage and all the numbers that were included elsewhere. Next slide, wages. This is what a couple of different wage allocations look like when we open our budget worksheet. The first one is a street worker. As you can see that not all the wages go to Fund 10. Some go to the 60, 61, and 63, and 18. Meaning that when we budget for wages, just because someone makes $54,000 doesn't mean if you cut that position, you get an additional $54,000 to the general fund. that person's wages are spread out between water, sewer, storm, recycling. And all those different funds have different revenue sources that are used to pay for those wages. Below that is utility worker. And that is allocated to mostly 61 and 60, but sometimes you'll find that they help out with snow plowing, so their wages will go to Fund 10. This part of our budget takes the most time. In the finance department, we actually look at past history to see where did these people work? How should we be allocating their wages moving forward? And with the number of accounts, we always have to make sure that when we do allocate, it equals 100% on the bottom, or else it won't tie up. Any questions?
You have anything? Comments?
Okay, the next one is a continuation of our wage work paper. This is benefits. So how I talked before about all the benefits, health insurance, dental, workers' comp, all of the benefits follow the hours of the person who worked. So when we are looking at the street worker, when they worked at 10 different accounts, those benefits have to also be budgeted in those areas. Oh, I skipped one, didn't I?
It was just salary.
Okay, salary. This is a typical salaried employee. Go back, there we go. Here's a salaried employee. Salaried employees are fixed percentages in our system. As a salaried employee, I do not enter my time. I have a certain salary I get on a bi-weekly basis, and the computer automatically knows how to allocate my wages. So if this position is eliminated, the general fund would see a savings of $47,000 in benefits. And then the rest are allocated to these other funds. So not a dollar for dollar for personnel, well, allocated to different funds. There we go, there's the benefits, as we were talking before. Typical benefit allocation. Again, this takes a lot of effort on our part, making sure that the person who did take family health insurance gets the correct dollar amount, and then it correctly gets allocated to all the funds properly. And on the bottom of our wage work paper, you'll see a summary like this. We can filter this by fund and by department, and it'll tell us how much is spent in each area. This wage and benefit work paper that I'm talking about is over 600 rows, so it's actually a pretty big beast to work with, especially if you get an error in the formulas. But it has been a lifesaver for us in making sure that we are accounting for all the wages and benefits that we pay people, making sure that we have the revenue to match that and pay everyone. Moving on to revenue. Revenues, the main thing with revenues is our levy increase is controlled by the state. Non-levy revenues do not change much year to year. And every year, the finance department looks at the revenue trends from last year, talks to department heads that may know more about, and then we do a final guesstimate. Here is an example of the current 2021 budget, and those are the categories that we have for revenues. Taxes, property taxes, other special assessments. The special assessments line is a line that is revenue we collect from title companies when they call and they ask if there's any balances owed by these properties. We charge a fee for that. And that's the dollar amount. So it's definitely depends upon how house sales are for the year in that line. Intergovernmental are all the funds we receive from the state and federal government. License and permits, just as it says, based on our fees, we collect money from our residents for certain things. Fines and forfeitures, that includes traffic fines and money that we receive from any court activity. This line is adjusted on a yearly basis because we accrue it. So when we collect funds January through June, probably a good 3 months worth may be related to last year. So even though, say we collected $80,000 for the year, if our total receivable balance went up or went down, the revenues would get adjusted accordingly. So when you see the budget status report and you see how we're doing, you can either get excited, but know for sure that that number will not be there at the end. It will get adjusted depending upon what the receivables do. Intergovernmental charges for services, that's a big one on there. 2019 was 180,000. And those are monies that we collect from others, specifically the town of Weston, we do their winter and street maintenance. Village of Cronenlitter, we do their inspections. And then Everest Metro. So we charge Everest Metro $35,000 to do their accounting every year. Moving on, we'll go to this is a trend for the revenue sources that we just went through. As you can see, the majority of them are the average, there's an average decrease, except for property taxes. Which does not give us much hope in the future when our property taxes are gonna be limited to really gain revenue from anywhere else. There is no other revenue sources unless we have a new fee or a new license and permits that we want to collect. Those numbers really aren't changing much. Tax levy, this is repeat for you guys, but I really want to get it in that our tax levy is regulated by the state. We can only increase it in net new construction again. What does that mean for us? That means that without our debt service exemption, next one. Without our debt service exemption, we are allowed to increase our levy 75,997 if our net new construction is 1.4. If that goes down, obviously that number will decrease, or up it may increase, but 1.4 is a pretty good trend. We haven't varied much. If you go up a slide, you can see our net new constructions, 1.4 is one of the highest since 2015. There's 1.85 in there too. But we've had years where it's under 1. I don't know how many expenditures that you've seen in the past actually don't increase CPI. That's what CPI is, but the Village of Weston can't increase their taxes CPI. So we are trying to fund expenditures that are going CPI and above, but not being able to increase our revenues to match that. Go all the way down to 23. So revenue detail.
Non-levy.
Yeah, non-levy. So above are the taxes, including property and other. This is what's included in those lines. The big one is the water utility. So all water utility payments, part of the as a fee for water utility as part of your cost when you pay the utility in turn gives it to the village. It's called the payment in lieu of taxes. And it's based on the value of the assets of the utility. So if the utility assets go up, the customers will have to pay a higher fee to the village. There's a lot of talk of, well, the utility customers should be paying more of the expenses of the village because they do a lot for the village. Like we have the guys in the back, and we have the utility shares the phone and the internet and the copier. But part of our thing is the water utility already pays quite a bit to the village. So when we're looking at that, we need to be very certain and really document if we want to move that direction. You know,
So, move in what direction, I guess, if you could
if
clarify?
we want to look at more detail of who does what regarding village versus
Oh,
the utility. If we wanted to dig into more detail, right now, my wages get allocated to the water utility, Jenna's, Keith's, and we've used the same allocation for many years. And if we're gonna be ending up looking to see if the utility's paying its fair cost, like doing cost studies on our time, doing cost studies on the phone usage. Well, phone's already allocated a little bit, but to more, we'll call it indirect cost. Make sure more costs are allocated to the utility.
Right. Although, you're talking about creating a lot more
Work.
or tracking of those costs individually and time, so is there really gonna be that much benefit from that? I don't know.
I don't think so. That's a conversation we were having in the
Right.
past. I just kind of want to bring that up. It's not a direction I want to go. I think everything is pretty good. The next item I guess I want to look at on this sheet is the utility tax, Village of Rothschild. Where'd you go?
I went to the next one.
Oh.
Okay.
Sorry. So this is a tax based on a 1996 agreement. Revenues from the Weston power plant are shared with us by the Village of Rothschild. This is ending in 2026. This is an area where I have kept the budget at $94,000 even though our revenues are in excess of that. At this point, we have budgeted approximately $93,000 in the CIP. That was done intentionally by the former finance director, very strategically. So they put the $93,000 in CIP, knowing darn well in 2026 we're going to need to pull that back and fill the hole. So instead of having a $94,000 revenue loss in 2026, we're going to pull back the taxes that are in CIP and plug that hole and hopefully not have to worry about that. So it was a pretty brilliant idea when they did that. But it is definitely something that we're gonna miss. It is a revenue loss, but it's something that we're able to fill the hole with and we'll just end up having to borrow more with our CIP when that time comes. Next one, these are the intergovernmental revenues that we get. They haven't changed much over time. We do get new ones every now and then, like the video service aid, that's a new aid. The state changed how much we can levy for cable franchise fees and in turn give us an aid. We'll be seeing that same thing for personal property tax in the future maybe. Currently, the governor vetoed the elimination of the personal property tax. He said he wants it back. It's still in the budget to fund if it goes away, but he said he didn't like the way that it was phrased in the budget. So at this point, it's not struck out. We will be able to levy personal property aid next year. But I believe the Republicans, I hope the Republicans are gonna be working with the governor and getting that eliminated, if not through the budget process, through a separate bill. Anything else in this sheet? No. The future of budgeting. Eventually, we believe that we need to move to a priority-based, value-based budgeting. With the tightened revenues that were coming up, it's gonna be essential for everyone to be on the same page of what our future goals are and to be able to align the money that we have, the limited funds we have, with the priorities that are set by the board and the community. As I said before, that $75,000 allowable levy increase is not gonna pay for much. At the Everest Metro currently, we are applying fund balance of $150,000 a year. That means that when Everest Metro balances their budget, they are using fund balance, so they're using reserves to plug into their operations. When those reserves are gone, the village needs to pay to keep the operations at status quo. Our percentage of that $150,000 is $116,000. So say, for example, next year, they can't apply that anymore. The village's portion of Everest Metro is going up $116,000 in addition to what we're paying now in 1 year. And I'm telling you, I can only take in $76,000 more money. How are we gonna pay for Everest Metro if I can only do that? That's where we have to look at priorities, and we have to work with our community and say, this is what we have, and are you happy with that? Or the other option is referendum. And that's another option, whether it's referendum for streets, public safety, anything to allow us to increase our levy more than the construction number. Priority-based budgeting really takes the communities and the village's values and puts them on paper. And you're gonna tell me, okay, you saw that most of my money goes to salaries for the village. So, okay, you're gonna say, we can get rid of a person at the village. Well, what are your priorities? What are you gonna pick? You tell me that customer service is a high priority for you, but then you're gonna say, well, we don't need that person to answer the phones. I mean, or streets are top priority, we're limited staff anyway, and you're gonna get rid of somebody. That's very difficult decisions, but then how else do we make these decisions if we already don't have a framework of what's top priority? So the priority-based budgeting includes community outreach and collaboration with residents. The webinar that we just attended, they did that by going out in the community. Like, I was talking to Jenna, it sounds terrible, but a lot of our community are at local establishments. Set up some near trail sites, it would be wiggly, and even the churches. I mean, it's kind of funny, but a lot of the people are either at bars or churches. You could probably get 90% of the population. So go to where they are, try to get their involvement in the community and get the village to adopt a vision, mission, and get some values of where we're moving in the future. So that's where I think in 10, 20 years, the future of budgeting for the village of Weston, where it should be. Maybe not my lifetime here, but it's a really great way to budget. A few communities in Wisconsin have the school district of Fort Atkinson. They were on our webinar. I know the other one is Washington County for sure. They gave a presentation before of this type of budgeting. Obviously a much grander scale, but it's still something we need to focus on. Okay, your turn.
Okay, so I get to tell you guys about TIF and TID, just tax increment financing. I put a link in here, we can send you the slides. The DOR has a TIF manual that has a ton more detail. And then after this, if you guys want more detail too, if you let us know, we can definitely write something else up. I tried to keep it higher level to not be overwhelming, but there's a lot to it. But the gist is that it's a tool for municipalities to fund infrastructure and other improvements through property tax revenue on newly developed property. So the end goal is that all of these taxing jurisdictions come together and say, yes, we're going to give you our taxes on any growth in this area. And we're going to create development with that, which means when it closes, we all have a bigger area of assessed value to spread the levy over. So, which is the total amount of property tax revenue each jurisdiction gets. So to do that, the development must meet the but-for test, so we can't just do it for fun. It needs to be, this wouldn't happen if it didn't have TIF assistance. So it can be applied kind of broadly depending, but generally if someone's sitting there and is developing everywhere and comes in and, I won't do this without TIF assistance, the village has to kind of decide, like, does this actually meet this, or is it not really applicable? Because you are basically borrowing money from all the other taxing jurisdictions. So you want to make sure that you're using that well to make sure that you increase that property tax base. So this is right out of the state's manual. And this is just kind of showing how TID works. So when you first create it, you set the base value. And the base value is the current value of all of the properties in the TID that exist the day that you create it. So all of the taxing jurisdictions get to keep their base value. So right now, like our taxes, we get to keep the portion on that base value. And so does the county, the school, and the tech college. And then any additional development that occurs in that area is considered increment. And the increment goes right to the TID funds, which are 21 and 26. And we get to use that to develop or pay debt or all that good stuff. And then when it closes, it redistributes everything. So if we have a bunch of cash at the end, we have to distribute that once all of the expenses and debts are paid off back to the other jurisdictions. And then going forward, ideally, everyone has a higher tax base that they get to spread their levies across. So this is a form the village has to do every year for the tax increment allocation, if you will. So you come up with the tax rate, the equalized rate for all of the taxing jurisdictions. And then you multiply that by the equalized value with the TID increment. And then you end up with basically minus the base value, how much of that is growth. And then that growth is so that 6.4 million on the bottom is what we receive in TID increment. So that's what flows into the TIF funds that we are able to expend. And this is just for 1 year, so this happens every year. This is just a summary. The expenditure period and closure period are the same for TID 1 and 2. They both end in 2026 for the expenditure period, and then we're required to close them in 2031. TID 1 is the bigger one. The current increment value is 271 million. It's currently working on the Weston Avenue corridor plan. And then I did some calculations. If we were to close TID 1 this year, which we won't, and I believe that we cannot, but if we were, we would have the opportunity to add $670,000 to the levy. So that's where that growth is. So like all those other areas would likely have growth to add as well. So the result of that is that the tax rate would decrease by 89 cents per $1,000 of assessed value. So the result of the TID is that taxes are going down and we get to raise our levy. So we have more money that we're able to put towards services, and then also it's spread out across more. So it's less expensive for the other taxpayers.
So Jenna, the 670,000 you came, how did you come up with that? Did you? go
I can
through a
show you
formula
the
with
lovely
with the
spreadsheet.
DOR? No, that's
It's a
fine.
fun calculation.
Why don't you bring up this?
Yeah, I have them. I was going to.
Just to know that you follow, whatever the process is.
Yeah, so there's an adjustment on the levy limit worksheet.
Okay,
If I can't say it off the top of my head, you get like 50% of the TID increment value divided by the equalized value.
I see.
So you get to add so much of it. I can pull them up quick after this.
Well, that's okay. So, and just to mention, and that's fine if everybody else wants to see it, don't let me, dissuade you, but, and just for the committee's, information, yeah, the focus, as we have discussed with the village board, is that our number one priority project in TID one is reconstruction of the Weston Avenue corridor. Because we do have an opportunity with the financial position of TID one to be able to reconstruct Weston Avenue, install utilities and so forth. Under the premise that it would not happen but for the existence of TID. Otherwise, it's something that'll happen piecemeal over time and probably unlikely it's gonna happen in any short period of time. But anyway, I think that's the thought process that we've had on that, and that is, as I said, number one project. But there are a number of other eligible projects in TID one. There had been the discussion of possible redevelopment on the Camp Phillips corridor from Highway 29 north to Schofield Avenue. That's really kind of a back burner thing, and if we're focused on Weston Avenue, it's unlikely that we're gonna have resources for that. But as we say, scrap one project like Camp Phillips Center, that's how Weston Avenue kind of jumps up on the list. So just kind of a
No, that's fine.
backtracking here a little bit, or maybe getting off track, but don't mean to do that.
No, that's fine.
So with the 670, another one of our options is to work with Greg and see if we can close some of it at a time. The 670,000 windfall in 1 year, it can cause some heartburn to especially us and then our other taxing jurisdictions, because it messes up the school funding formula. So then the school district is gonna get this one-time large sum of money. It messes up with their funding formulas, how they get state aid. And so they have talked to us previously, and I'm very curious to see what we could do about that. Other than that, anything else?
Increment value in TID two is 26 million. The main project in that is a Schofield Avenue redevelopment plan, and they're working on a plan amendment right now. Planning and development that's in the works. If we were to close TID two this year, it would increase the levy 64,000, which would decrease the rate 9 cents. And that's assuming that we claimed the whole amount to increase the levy. I think that's the last slide in that. Do you want to see the calculation, or are you good?
I think
Well,
we have
maybe
the calculation.
To follow up on the TID two question
Go
as
for it.
well, I mean,
I will.
one of the thoughts as far as the project plan amendment goes is to make it explicit that certain projects would be eligible for TID assistance. There's been some discussion about the village maybe purchasing some properties to help redevelop them, turn them from a brown field to a green field, or simply to do some demolition that may not happen for a developer that might come in and look at that property and see that, that cost of preparing that site really outweighs going and finding a blank site. But also combining some of the smaller properties along the route, along the avenue, because those are again things that may not happen but for some assistance from TID. So those were a couple things that really are not part of what TID 2 has been trying to accomplish in the past. Of course, our window of time is relatively short. 2026 is the expenditure period expiration, although we can't have commitments for spending to the end of the TID life. As long as we have knowledge of what the amounts of those are, and there's agreements in place for making those expenditures beyond, or making repayments beyond that expenditure period. So, the proposed TID project plan amendment is being, edited or updated right now, and Plan Commission would be directed to hold that public hearing by the village board. So that Plan Commission will be considering that proposal at their August meeting. It'll be the second Monday of August.
Any questions for?
Here's the TIF, that's the work paper that Jenna used to calculate. It includes a ton of numbers.
It does. So it's kind of like the levy limit worksheet, and then this is your adjustment that you could take when you close a TID. So you take the increment value, which is 271 million. And then you have to divide that by the TID out equalized value. And then we get 50% of that. So we get to take back 12.98% of that increment value, which is what this ends up being. And then we could adjust the levy any amount between 0 and 670,304.
You don't have to take it all,
Yeah,
but we're not sure if we can carry it over, like,
I think it's one time.
yeah, we think it's like one.
So the issue is that, and that's what you're asking, is that you have to take it at that particular moment. And with that in mind, it's a windfall amount initially, except for the fact that in the case of our inability to raise our tax limits, taxes as such, this would fund some of the unfunded parts at that point. That's why if we could do this on a piecemeal basis, that would make it a lot easier for us to incorporate it into our tax rate, as well as have less of an effect upon the other tax units that time. So, especially with, obviously the TIF 2 is smaller, and that would have a minimal effect on us anyway. It's this one that would be the big issue. And if we could, I happen to be on that committee, so if we could turn around and take a portion of specifically, say, the grouping of where the hospital is in that area first because of what has happened there at this point, and then have the remaining portion of the district continue with its growth at that point.
Yep. So with that, with closing, the other thing to note is that we currently have, I took the budgeted numbers, we have about $250,000 in admin expenses in the general fund. So if we were to close that, those expenses all come back to the general fund.
Right.
So that's what we have to cover within that. So there's about 400,000 additional in there of funds that we would have. And then I just did a calculation. So there's your change in the tax rate. So this is what the 2020 tax rate was. And if we were to have closed it, the tax rate would be 6.36 instead of the 725. So it would be a decrease on a $200,000 home of $178 on their tax bill.
But we would have to somehow cover those additional $200,000 of expenses at the same time.
Yeah, they would get covered within this. So this is assuming the way I have this, that we're increasing our levy by that. So it would just be a extra 400,000 after we take those 200 back.
I know the school district definitely wants
Right.
us to try and do it in more in increments rather than, okay. Lauren?
I just had a question. We always talk about the expenditure restraint. This, some would consider a windfall. If we spend it and increase our taxes or our expenditure, we would lose the levy limit of the expenditure restraint dollars for a year, correct?
I don't know, I'd have to look into that.
I would think probably. The way that it's set up, I wouldn't be surprised if
I wouldn't
you
be
would.
I think I had the same question about the recovery, American Recovery.
Yeah, but see, those are two separate things, like this is general levy, which you can't just throw in a separate fund. Unlike the ARPA money, I can throw in a separate fund because it's a non-levy
Okay.
revenue source.
But this money, if we spend, if you say, oh, well, let's increase our levy, $500,000, and that exceeds our levy limit or our expenditure restraint, we would lose it for a year, correct?
Yes.
Then you're resetting your base then too.
Yeah, so then you have a higher base. So then from year to year, we have more to work with.
Right.
Which we have done in the past.
Right,
Yes,
we
I
did
think we
that
lost
previously,
this
right,
in here, maybe 17.
Years back.
right.
Just really quick, I did the same thing for TID 2, which is the 64,000 is what we would get to add on. Would decrease the tax rate 9 cents. It would be a $17 decrease to your tax bill. And then TID 2 has about 46,000 in admin expenses currently. So again, those would have to go back, which means overall we'd have about an extra 20,000 that would just be
Minimal
revenue
effect.
expenses, yeah.
Minimal effect.
So before we change subjects, I do want to go back to the budgeting. There's a couple things, like, I really wanted to get the committee's opinion on a couple different things. So I showed you how we budget for Rothschild utility tax, right? I told you that I budget 94,000, we get 115. So every year, we're gonna have that excess. Is it appropriate to continue budgeting that way, knowing that in 2026, I can only plug the hole with $93,000 revenue? So is it appropriate to continually under budget what I know I'm gonna get? But on the other hand, I don't wanna budget those funds for operations that are gonna be needed in the next 7 years when it's not there. So one other thing is one-time funding. Should we budget what we're supposed to, but make sure those revenues get put towards an expenditure that's a one-time fund? And I have a couple different lines like that. So I have Villager Cronenware. We get $20,000 from them. I think I budget 8. I'm a little hesitant budgeting any more revenue because all of a sudden our director says, I want my guys back because I have a home project. Well, that revenue's gone. I can't replace the $20,000 from Villager Cronenware for the inspections we do, but I still have the same 2 inspectors there that I need to fund their wages for. I mean, it's tough.
You know, the philosophy of most accountants is be conservative on revenues and excess on expenditures, and that's what you're basically doing at this time. I guess I would prefer that you continue with that scenario. If anything at all, like on the taxes with the power plant, I'm not sure if we should be changing that and lowering what we have to eventually fund in that, in 2026 or whenever that is occurring. Maybe not immediately, but I'm thinking when we're at that 3-year period, we're gonna have to really look at that. Because that's gonna be a funding that we're going to have to come up with, as well as maybe, and then this is just a maybe thing, is that maybe at 2026 or there close to that, we might be looking at getting some of this TID area closed, and that may coincide with some of that. I guess that's what I would try to work toward.
I kind of agree with Bob there, that, you know, thing is that money that we're getting from Rothschild right now is almost like one-time funding.
It
Right.
is.
You know, I mean, yes, we had it for a lot of years, but it still is not a guaranteed funding. We knew it was going to run out.
Mhm.
Now, I don't know if Ryan, Mark, if you understand what we're talking about here as far as the power plant and Rothschild, or?
Entirely,
Okay, well, when we, Rothschild annexed about, what was it, about a third of the town at that time?
Yeah.
Approximately.
Yeah.
And then when they discovered that, when they did that, that they now had in their possession the power plant that had been in Weston, and we were getting the funds, the utility funds from the power plant. Now Rothschild at that time got twice as much as what we did as a town, because villages get more than towns.
Mhm.
So we discovered that Rothschild had a little bit of a illegal approach to, or I don't know if you want to call it, but there was a little bit on how they got some of the people to become part of the village so they could get the power plant. Anyway, this was starting to go, and we were threatening lawsuits, and it was going to carry on for a long time. And so we reached an agreement that because now they were getting twice as much as what the village had got, that we would get a percentage of that power plant for X number of years. I can't remember, was it 25, 20? I can't
Don't
remember.
remember for sure. It was, I
But
think it was at least
anyway-
25.
Yeah, anyway, so that, but it kept, as time went on, it started to decrease. And that's what we're got here. It's, now we're reaching the end of that agreement. So we are going to lose any contributions in the time. That's what we're talking about here.
This goes back to the water tower, right?
Pardon?
That's the water tower.
No,
Yeah, well, the water tower that. they don't-
That was all,
power plant.
the power plant actually, because when they annexed the properties at that big, they had to, first of all, they had to have the residents agree on a referendum to be annexed. And part of that was the idea that they would be receiving a large sum from the power plant. And there was a question, as Barb was saying, whether or not that was part of their tactic to have the individuals agree to being annexed at that point.
Right, and there was a property owner that, a business owner, that they promised stuff that they should not have been promising at that time.
I don't know how it all came about. It had to be like 1991, right? Isn't that when they?
Yeah, it was in that period, yeah. Yeah, we
Yeah,
lost,
because it was shortly thereafter that happened, and then there was the Schofield deal with annexation that we filed for
right,
village status, so.
So the water tower ending up in Rothschild was a consequence of the annexation.
right.
But, you know, there's a part of that agreement that talks about how formerly foremost now, Kerry
Mhm.
is handled, they're like as the DNR puts it, a totally separate water system or whatever, because it's the well and that tower are a village of Weston owned and operated, and they also serve the Red Mountain Metropolitan Sewerage District treatment facility on the other side of the river. So it's an interesting situation still.
And it was no longer the power plant,
Right.
no longer, we had no connection to it, it was, so that's why it went to that.
And the reality was the power plant had no resident vote
Right.
at that point. So they really didn't have to annex that portion of it,
But it was,
but it was one of their goals.
So I have a question on that, Jessica, I don't know if you don't know the answer to this, but I understood that Wisconsin Public Service is decommissioning part of that Weston power plant,
Yes,
the
sir.
coal-fired plant. How does that affect this tax thing, if
I
at
was
all?
gonna email Gary before we start the budget to see if I need to adjust it. So,
One of the.
I had read somewhere it will, because
Yeah, I would
it will
think.
no longer be a, you know, however their formula goes, that
Right.
will,
Because one of the units is gonna be
For the utility.
terminated, the other one has been converted to a natural gas immediate unit type of thing, my understanding.
I just happened to think we were talking and you two probably, had no idea what we were, what
Us
that
old folks.
agreement was. It was a nice agreement, but it was, there was a reason for it. Okay, go ahead. Is that it?
Yeah.
Okay, so we are through item 6. We don't have nothing to approve or to acknowledge or. Policy issues, discussion recommendation, accounts receivable update.
So this is just a follow-up item on the accounts receivable. So I have a summary in there. We have about 26,000 out there as of June 30th. The ones that we have out there are refuse and recycling fees that aren't billed through taxes, village service fees, lease billings, bulk water usage, property damage, mobile home fees, and personal property tax. Currently, we can forward, let's see, let me go to the next one. I have 2 spreadsheets in here, that's the aging. Okay, I think it's about 7,000 that we would have the capability to forward to SDC. The next agenda item is regarding getting a contract for that skip tracing that I was talking about previously. So, let's see. The ones that have the most out there, which are current, are the ones I just sent a statement. A lot of that is mobile home fees. Those Colonial Gardens pays about $6,500. And then 52 Properties is Stillwater Landing. They do not typically pay their bill right away. It always ends up getting paid and it will be paid by the end of the year, but they're very pokey on paying. And I did reach out to them on that. So they have about 3,800 out there right now. So of our receivables, about 6,000 are related to personal property tax and 10,000 are mobile home fees. Then the rest is other and water, which ends up being about 9,000. You guys have any questions on the receivables?
Now, the water, are those still been put on their taxes if it isn't?
Yeah, so the water, I was going to talk to Teresa, we'll see, some of those can go on the taxes. I think the majority of what's outstanding are like a bulk water usage, which they went to the overhead fill and filled up with water, and then they haven't paid for it yet. So that's something that gets billed once a year. The other thing that gets billed under the water category is like damaged meters and stuff like that. If it's a benefit to the property itself, it can go on the property taxes through the tax roll. Otherwise, we can try to collect that through SDC. Depending. Which is the state debt collection program,
Right.
it's specified. They will do collections for us.
Perfect.
Any other questions on the receivable update?
Anything on that? Okay. Do you want to acknowledge?
So moved.
Moved by Bob,
Second.
by Ryan. On the question? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So carried. Discussion and possible recommendation on contract with credit management control for skip tracing services.
So this is a contract with Credit Management Control. And what they will do is get us the identifying information that we need to forward things on to the state debt collection program. So their fee is $2 per skip trace. Our current expense, if I were to forward everything we have out there, is gonna be like $30. So it's pretty minimal. Their contract also has a clause in there where they'll do collections for us at a rate of 25% of whatever they collect. He said that's just standard in there, so at this point, we plan to forward everything through SDC. But if for some reason they can't get that, we may be able to use this credit management control just as a last resort to pursue that for us. I looked at the state contract for the other bigger names that do it, and it looks like they're on a subscription basis, so they would want $60 to $80 a month per user. So based on what we have right now, I think it makes more sense just to do on a per name basis. And ongoing, if there's an accident, people usually don't pay on those. If it's under $1,000, those are the only ones that we would be forwarding to SDC. Everything else would be going through our insurance. So probably won't have much. Just have questions?
Questions, comments? Okay, what's your recommendation to the village board?
I move to recommend, we enter into the contract on credit management control.
Have a second?
Second.
Second by Mark. On the question? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So carried.
Just a question, when we contract with stuff like this, do we have in my world, it would be called a vendor management package or policy? You have to get certain information from them, W-9s, whatever, references. Do we do stuff like that when we're contracting with a third party?
I think on bigger things, they would, like RFP process, things that run through that, those would happen. The W-9 will happen. We have to have that for when we send 1099s out.
Are these through state vendors sites, or is it through like a state of Wisconsin vendor list?
Kind of. I asked the state who they use or if they have recommendations for the skip tracing. And they let me know the two that they work with. And then the credit management control is one that they know a lot of their clients work with. So they gave me a list of 3 and said, check these out, basically. And then the credit management control came back with a contract right away. And then after looking at the state contract and seeing the subscription fee, I didn't think that made much sense for how many we have.
It's been more on subscription fees than we would on collections.
Yeah, and they may have a individual fee, but my understanding of LexisNexis and the Clear is you would go on there and do the search yourself. So then I would go on there and actually look for the information, so I don't know that they would have like a per search, maybe. I could check if you guys wanted me to, but otherwise the $2 per name, I figured for how small that was.
Yeah.
Better for you to have them do it. I guess.
Yes, and they do the work for us, yes. So it's kind of like, that
No, I
makes
would-
sense, but
Sounds like a legal question almost.
But to his point,
Right.
it's a checklist on any new vendor.
Yeah.
You know, in my world, we do the same thing.
Yeah.
And nobody gets into our company unless we go through this checklist. I think it's very smart.
There's a high, medium, low. If somebody's a low risk vendor, I mean, it's very minimal stuff that you're asking for, but if they're a high risk vendor, it could be quite a packet of stuff that you end up getting.
It eliminates surprises later.
You have a generic name for what you're asking, what those are called? It's just a vendor.
I could send you ours. I mean, ours involves a lot of food and food safety.
SOQ,
I could send you a list.
because as to Jenna's point, I guess, on, say engineering contracts and things like that, we go through review of proposed contracts and, go through statement of qualifications, submittals and all that stuff, but, I don't know if some of this goes in the legal realm, but we could look into that more.
Sure.
yeah.
As far as any impact on our insurance, I guess, it would be the other implication you're saying.
Put that down in your notes and then
Mhm.
back to us on it, maybe the next meeting.
We could easily come up with something. I guess the hardest thing is getting staff to follow, because a lot of times Public Works went and they bought this thing from this company, and they're the only ones that have it, and now we have the invoice. That's more likely what happens usually. We usually get invoices on our end. We don't have a purchasing department that things have to go through. We don't have a purchase order process. That's something we've looked at, but a lot of times there's not, it's a lot of discretion.
I'm just trying to look here, discussion, okay, so what is your pleasure?
I think we have a motion on that, I think.
Oh, okay, I didn't write any, okay, yes, it is, Bob,
Okay, and then I made a note, we can look into,
we did that.
like a vendor edition.
Question
Yeah.
afterwards,
Yeah,
okay,
sorry.
okay, but we didn't vote on it, did we?
We did.
Okay,
Okay, thank you. The question threw me off is after things go here. Okay, future items, next meeting,
We have item 9 yet.
oh, I'm sorry, see, I got that. Discussion on debt issue for municipal center.
So we just got an email from Myron on Friday with a proposed payment list. And so by the end of the year, we'll have over $8 million in payments. Coming rather quickly, we need to have a plan for how to pay this. So I'm coming to the committee and asking to see, is it okay if the village sends out RFPs to our local banks? That's the avenue that we were kind of talked about before, is that we would be looking at our local banks to see if they would be willing to help us out instead of going out on the market and paying a ton of fees and legal and attorney attorney fees, and then we have our financial advisor fees. We have a ton of fees when we go out on the market for debt. So what we're looking at is maybe approaching our local banks, seeing if we can get several notes in the next year. And then say in November of 2022, we would be refinancing into one 20-year bond.
Okay, so we're not actually going out for bids on the building until 2022?
No, we'd
No,
be closing.
Financing, yeah, just the financing.
Well, yeah, that's,
So that's been the,
So we're very short term.
it's been the plan all along, the borrowing process or strategy. In terms of how this would work for this project that we would do, we would get notes as the project costs come in, and then once we have the, final number, then we would go out for a refunding. We'd be issuing a general obligation refunding bond, is what it would be called. But I guess what Jesse is saying is we've been considering doing this with local lenders rather than going out on the market and getting those general obligation
that would
notes.
pay at all to do that.
Right, so that's what she's asking or getting clarification on, and yeah,
My,
that's,
my recommendation is if we can get local banks to go ahead with short-term notes on that, that would be the route to go, gives them business as well as the fact that then we will have a hard number to go after, late in 2022.
Yeah, we can't, so as you remember, the Village of Weston cannot issue a bond, like we can't go issue a 20-year bond, $15 million worth tomorrow for our brand new building. Because some of that building has general administration office space and certain parts of that building don't qualify for a 20-year bond. But the state has a loophole that if you go and issue 10-year notes, you can refinance those notes for the whole building to a 20-year bond. So that's one of the reasons why we can't just go out for a 20-year bond.
Okay.
The other option is we can go for a bond anticipation note. So what we'd go is out on the market and get a $15 million note in anticipation of refunding that with a bond, say the end of 2022. That's also an option, but after seeing all those fees that we've paid for the upon issuance to Quarles and then Ellers, and then I looked at what we paid for Intercity when we borrowed the 2.5. I'm like, well, let's see if we can work with our local banks and see if we can get this money we needed. And then we'll just have one large issue and then a one-time lump sum of very large issuance costs.
Hope the interest rates don't go up.
We,
So
that's a great fear of mine. I don't know what the economy is doing. I just hope that things stay low for a year and a half yet.
yeah,
We cannot issue our 20-year bond now. We could work with Greg. If we really think that things are gonna go up, what we would do is split the building and go out and issue a 20-year bond on the parts that we're able to do. And then we'd issue 10 years on the parts that we couldn't. That's what we'd have to do. We'd have to split the building apart. And say next month that things look really terrible, we could give Greg a call and say, hey, can we start this process? We fear the worst, because when Greg presented that slides for us, he added, I think, was it 70 basis points? 75 basis points. But
Yeah,
I don't know,
that's a chunk of change on
well,
15.
that's my concern, you know, that we're doing this way out and we got decent rates now and it's like, why, how, that, you know, that we can't do that. But I understand what you're saying, is we can't, parts of it can't do it. So,
yeah.
but we'll keep track of
Do you
it.
know what the percentage is of the building that can be done?
Well, I talked to Keith before, wasn't it the public works was about $10 million worth?
Right, there was a split out.
But we can't do equipment. So we'd have to actually take up the equipment that's in that $10 million and just do the actual structure.
Yeah. Well, I guess I shouldn't say that, because you have a hoist and lifts, the crane and the hoist, I should say.
It's something to really pay attention with the economy, the way it's going and interest rates.
For what it's worth, some of the preliminary indications from the Fed is that they're going to try and keep the interest rates at about where they are to sort of get the economy as close back to where it was pre-pandemic, and then whatever resulting inflation may occur, trying to nip it at the bud at that point, rather than sort of try to preemptively kill inflation and raise the interest rates beforehand.
That's what we're hoping.
Well, they've had several meetings about that recently, and everything that I've been reading has said that they're going to stay the course.
Well, that, we're just saying that,
Yeah.
you know, if there's a way of trying to get it at the lower rates rather,
Right.
if things start going, if we can do
Right.
something to, you know, get the majority of that cost under the lower rates, because that was not in the plan.
It wasn't.
So, do you need a motion to that effect, or?
No, it's not agendized for that. It was
Right.
just basically discussion, just
Right.
looking to fill you out.
Go find some cheap money.
Yeah.
Go find some money.
Finance directive is.
And then following up with this, what you would be proposing to do then is have a resolution adopted by the board to allow us to refund
Right.
anything we get before you get any arrangements with financial institutions, is that how?
No, what I need, at the next, so right now, we don't even have the resolution in place to pay any of these bills yet.
Right.
As a government, we need the resolution which allows us to pay these bills and then reimburse ourselves with debt proceeds. So that resolution will be coming next month, along with the RFP results, hopefully we'll have to see how that goes. I probably will actually reach out to bankers myself. I wanna really get a feel of what they think is possible, how to structure this, because I don't know how much the local banks will be willing to borrow us, along with, okay, if I go to this bank, how much more do I need from a different bank? And some banks, like, I can't structure it as a line of credit. I need to have it legally a general obligation note, and that secures the bank and it secures us,
Right.
so that if anything happens, I can levy to pay that loan.
Right.
So it can't just be a line of credit where I draw.
Right. Right.
So we have to get it set up appropriately.
Okay, sounds like a plan.
Temporary plan in place.
Okay, you didn't need any action, no,
No.
because there's nothing there for action. Okay, resolution and ordinances. If none, future items now. Next meeting is Monday, August 16th at 4:30. That's the regular meeting. Topic for future meetings, the budget. Were you gonna bring us anything on what they marked and recommended as far as a checklist on vendors or whatever? you
And
want?
talk about, I think we're gonna start at the department level, director level, see what kind of controls we can put in place, see what they say, what would work. Cause honestly, once finance knows that there's a vendor out there, something was already bought. So the initiative is gonna be moving towards the directors and making sure that we can work together and develop a checklist that staff is gonna be able to follow.
Did you
Sure.
want anything from like Mr. Maloney or?
If you need something, just reach out to us.
I do that.
All right. Remarks from staff, anything?
We may or may not have a tourism commission, right?
What are you talking?
Tourism commission meeting in August,
Well, we have a meeting on the contract status on
Right.
Thursday
okay?
this week. I think is what I just got an email from Mayor Rosenberg about. So we're still Wausau's still trying to get their CVB contract to the liking of both their
I mean, if you wanna have an update?
City council,
Prior
I'm
to
sorry.
finance.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
They're trying to get it to the liking of the city council and the CVB. They had not gotten any feedback from CVB until like last week, so there's an update meeting on it now, and then once they have their contract finalized, we would have it back to us. I guess the decision to be made would be, what's the makeup of the tourism commission, what's their mission? If we're gonna delegate, if our desire was to delegate all decisions on funding of events to the CVB, then the tourism commission really serves no function.
Right.
So I think the recommendation though has been that we retain control of that
Now, it's-
decision-making process, so that would be, that's really the decision of the contract and how it's structured, and then that's how we'll know whether we have a tourism commission in the end here.
Yeah, I would hope that we would retain some little bit of a hand on it, so it's not just,
Rubber stamp.
yeah. You know, that's way, all of a sudden you start questioning what's going on and
So,
you have no knowledge.
Sean just emailed that the rugby was canceled. Well, we gave money to the rugby, so I was wondering, do we get our money back?
My understanding is we are gonna get some of it back.
Oh.
So we're gonna get some of it back. And then, they had some costs, but is that the one we gave 10?
I think so.
Yeah.
So I got a call from somebody that said that they're gonna give that back.
Okay, was that the one 10, but they thought about 20 or something?
No, that was the other one.
Oh,
That he sat quietly at this meeting and then I think saw no objections, so he doubled down and went for 20. You know, just because they ask it doesn't mean we have to give it.
right.
Right.
Yeah, I'd like to, you know, if we were to take care of this, we don't have the knowledge or whatever, but I would like to think that we know what's going on and if we want, we could object, if, or something, so that's just my
The
opinion.
information I got was from Nick Oligard or, so.
Okay.
I'm a little surprised, I heard that 2 weeks ago, and I'm surprised that it hasn't come here yet. So I'll reach out to him.
Okay.
Maybe there's a contingency that we put on this money that it has to be spent for that event or else returned.
Right.
Maybe we have that put on her for future, because boy, that'd be
Yeah.
a real stinker. I mean, it could be a weather issue, it could be a COVID issue, it could be anything issue. And then all of a sudden, well, there's nothing here that says we have to give it back. Hopefully.
Yeah.
So let's just see how far they get on the next ask,
Yeah.
if they ask again.
Okay, any remarks from committee members? Other than, like I said, the visitors thing that we don't lose control of it. Any announcements?
Just for the committee's knowledge, we're having a small groundbreaking ceremony at the new building site tomorrow at 5 p.m. I know members of the building committee and the village board have been notified about that. It was not necessarily widely advertised, so I don't believe you're able to attend, Bob, I heard.
Oh.
Okay, I'd like to have you there, but
Well, at this point, I'm not gonna be able to, but, well, things may change between tonight and tomorrow morning.
sure.
Anything else? Okay, I have adjournment to the finance committee.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion by Mark,
Second it.
second by Bob. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So carried. So my thing says